Hi, everyone. My name is Christian, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Kiewit. Thanks for being here today, and welcome to the webinar, How to Build Trust in Government Through Citizen-Centric Services. Quick note on today's webinar, like you probably expect, will be recorded so you can go back and review it or share with a colleague who might have missed it. And if you have any questions as you go along, Jose and I will we'll make sure we have time to answer some questions that you might have. So they're on a Zoom toolbar, you'll see a Q&A section there, and you can just pop your questions in there as we go along. But I think cognizant of time, we'll just go ahead and jump in, get started with some quick introductions. Again, my name is Christian. I work on the marketing team here at Kiewit. I'm originally from the US, the Philadelphia area, and I'm based in our Copenhagen office now. Jose?
Yep, and I'm Jose. I'm the VP of Technical Engagement here at Kiewit. I'm also not originally from Denmark, originally from Portugal, but moved here 15 years ago and based in Copenhagen. In our technical engagement organization, a big part of what we do is customer onboarding, right? Is helping our customers setting up the waiting room, setting up our platform together with their infrastructure, and also to ensure the success of the events that we help our customers. Furthermore, we also do a lot of the ongoing support work, and I'm super happy to be here together with Christian to share some of our experience in this.
Great. A quick rundown of what we'll talk about today, a bit about expectations and trust in the digital world in the context of public sector, some strategies for delivering citizen-centered services, and that'll be towards the end, right before we jump into the Q&A. So to maybe, Jose, could you kind of help situate the state of play today for us?
Definitely, Christian. So what we would like to start with is some general understanding here, right? And we know that digital transformation is here and is here to stay, right? And together with that, we also know that it has massive benefits both to the public sector and also to citizens. And one example here that you can see that is with Denmark, which is one of the top countries across many surveys in digitalization. And here you can see some data that shows that digitalization helps driving savings and efficiencies. It helps saving time both for citizens, businesses, and organizations. And it also boosts citizen satisfaction, right? You can see here 91% of Danish citizens who access an authority's website or self-service solution are and have been satisfied with it.
Great. Yeah, and so it's important to recognize that digital has become the face of the public sector. So what does that mean? It means it's where most of our interactions with the public sector take place online. It's where people go for help. It's where their perceptions of the public sector are formed, and it's where trust can be built or broken, right? So it's these digital service interactions, which is the main sphere, the main place where you want to get things right to make sure you're creating satisfied, trusting, happy citizens. And just to kind of zoom it out a little bit, what's the end game here, right? The consequences are much larger than just satisfaction with a public service, a digital service per se. We know that satisfaction in services builds trust in government writ large, right? More broadly speaking, and which makes everything better if you have that trust in with your citizens, right? It's a cornerstone aspect. So Jose mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the concrete benefits, the save time and resources, but really getting digital service delivery right is part of that larger foundational mission of fostering trust in government as a whole, and kind of also supporting engagement and community as well, when done well. Now, the difficult part, Jose talked about this, this digital transformation has a ton of benefits. It's also, what people expect. So it's kind of a win-win when it gets right, but it's difficult to do that. So in the past, some of the shortcomings of the past aren't acceptable today. Citizens expect central, fast, modern, available services. They expect services that can meet them at home, online, when they want, quickly and easily. And it's not always easy to live up to. There's a lot of pressure to do that.
Yeah, and Christian, here I would like to add a couple more words to some of those challenges, right? And we highlight three of them here that we would like to share. So the first one here is the expectation and the challenge of achieving a system that is always on and is fair, right? We are often talking about complex systems and adding to the mix the fact that usually the events that we see in this area do have quite high visibility, right? Including from the media. So both complexity of the systems and high expectation and high stakes on when running those events. On the second one here in the middle, we highlight the fact that the end users, us as citizens who are experiencing the services and using the services, we are comparing those services and that experience with the best services out there, right? So there's this need, this expectation of almost perfection in every interaction that is quite hard to meet. And the last one that we wanted to highlight here is around budget considerations, right? It also links a bit with the experience component, that it is not easy to compete with what you could call it the private sector titans out there, right? With very different types of budget. Adding to that is also this importance of using resources in an efficient and effective way when we are in public sector, when we are using our taxpayers' money. So it's again, as you mentioned, Christian, very high expectations and quite some challenges, some difficult challenges to meet those expectations as well.
Yeah. So thanks, Jose. That's kind of like just the intro for today's presentation to kind of set the scene a little bit from what we've seen with the public sector organizations we work with. Just quickly, like, why is it that me and Jose are here talking about it today? So at Kiewit, we help public sector organizations build trust by delivering fair, transparent, and reliable online experiences, especially during peak demand. The way that we do that is with a virtual waiting room that lets you control the flow of visitors into your systems in real time to ensure the capacity is never exceeded. That helps, with cost savings of scaling and other things that might end up breaking if the peak demand is too high anyway. So there's some efficiencies to be gained there, but you're also helping to provide a fair and transparent experience to customers as they wait to get into the service. So again, as Jose mentioned, there's a lot of on these peak demand days, right, there's a lot of pressure because it is such a good opportunity to deliver a very satisfactory, service that your citizens are really happy with, and it kind of adds to the trust building process. But there's also a lot of pressure to deliver on that. It's also often a high profile day in terms of the media and other places. So again, Kiewit, what we help public sector organizations do is ensure citizens always have access to those critical services, regardless of the demand. And that's kind of some of the perspective we bring to the table today.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. And here we just want to double click a little bit on our experience and where we see specifically with the public sector clients that we work with across the globe. And the situations that we see them using the virtual waiting room and taking advantage of it and improving the end user experience with that, right? And you can see here in the list is a lot about those services requesting different things from the government, right? It could be around visa applications, different types of claims and registration, tax filing and returns as well. So a lot of work that we have done with organizations across the globe to help with this, and in some of the cases it's actually often the case that there's this difference between supply and demand, right? And that's where we can really help in these situations. That's some of the experience that we have here. However.
Yeah. So that's a great, just to point there when we talk about supply demand. I mean, it could be booking, time slots for access to a national park or time slots for a vaccination. or a certain a fixed pool of funding, right, for home renovations or whatever it is. So they just to add a couple of concrete examples of that, Jose. I think that's a great point of that mismatch there.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. And we also wanted to add that it's not only with public sector that we work with. We work with organizations also outside public sector across the globe. And you can see some of them listed here across the different industries. But one thing that we wanted to highlight is that the challenges with providing reliable services and handling peak traffic go beyond public sector, right? This is something that we see across the customers, the organizations that we work with, and something that we help across. And it's also important to then take that experience and also that we are able to bring it back to the public sector. I think that's a great strength and a great opportunity as well.
Yeah, great point, Jose. So, we've established a promised land of digital services done well, right? So now, what are some ideas for how do we get there, right? What are the ingredients that make up a trustworthy service? So to do that, let's look at maybe what comprises trust, so we know what strategies to go after. And then, like I said, you definitely stick around for the here in 5-10 minutes when we play the UK Home Office interview, because I think they hit on a lot of these points in a really nice way as well. But one framework that we'd like to use is the OECD, 5 core components of trust, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Just to make sure we're spelling out our acronyms here, right? And so they're intergovernmental organization that acts as a platform to help compare best practices when it comes to public service, or government and public sector, sorry. So there's 2 sort of core anchors in how they think about it. There's trust in intentions, so what do you plan to do? And then trust in competence. How well do you execute on what you plan to do, right? So when we talk about intentions, integrity is the government using power wisely, using public resources ethically and efficiently. Openness is the government interacting with, listening to, consulting with citizens. And then fairness, making sure that there's fair and equitable access for everyone. And then is the government sort of capable of and has a track record of executing on those intentions. So responsiveness can be thought of as responding to the needs and expectations of citizens. And then reliability, is the government embracing new technologies, responding to crises, delivering on their promises, kind of helping across the board, day in, day out, give people the feeling that my government worked for me today. So that's sort of the framework, and we'll dive into 3 of them today, just for the strategies here. Jose,
Yep.
You take it over.
Yes, definitely, Christian. Thank you. And so here we want to take a step further and talk about some of the strategies that we think are very important to address this, right? And as you, Christian, also shared before, there is this correlation between service satisfaction and trust, and we want to make sure that is taken in the positive way and ensure that there's a virtual cycle there. So we'll share three strategies that we believe are important in this area, and the first one is around providing reliable online services, right? And here, this for us is a very foundational one, right? So with me as a user, does the service that I'm accessing work, and does it work consistently, right? So this is at the base of everything else that we do. And to talk a little bit more about that, we have here the Logic Monitor survey of around 300 IT decision makers that asked about the most common causes for service downtime. We'll not be going through the 6. We'll just touch upon the first 2, and the first one being network failure. And this is something that we ourselves in Kiewit focus a lot of internally and keep on working on and improving that to ensure that we have a reliable platform. And this is, and also a lot of the answers in the survey are around kind of developing the expertise in this area, making sure that the architecture is set up in a way that there is building redundancy also around the monitoring and diagnostics of the traffic and your systems, and also how to best recover from any issues that might occur. So that's the top one, network failure. So on the second one in this survey was usage spikes and surges, right? And here it's also something that can be addressed in different ways, right? So one way of handling usage spikes is to kind of back to the system architecture, right? To have an architecture in place that is able to scale with the surges, right? That's not always easy to do, and there's always, or quite often, also external dependencies as well that might prevent that. But it's definitely one thing to analyze. The other one is CDNs, content distribution networks, that might also help handling those surges. And would also like to touch upon another option for handling this traffic spikes, that is actually virtual waiting rooms, right? And this is something that I think, Christian, you would like to tell us, share a little bit about one of those cases.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. And like I said, Kiewit, this is kind of Kiewit's bread and butter, right? The sudden traffic surges. For me, I always find quite, when I see these across different customers, really quite powerful, the visual aspect of this. So just to see how quickly things can change minute by minute. So just to give an example, so here we have a graph, time broken down 5 minutes on the x-axis. On the y-axis, it's visitors per minute. So this is visitors per minute coming into a certain section of the site. So in this case, it would it could be a login page, or it could be a protected landing page, it could be a protected action on the site. But imagine like this is they're coming in to do a registration or a booking. And this red line here is what the customer, this is from a European health agency this is during corona vaccination time. So this is for booking appointments for corona vaccinations. And they had said that their system should be able to handle about 1,000 visitors per minute, depending on how long it takes for them to book and what their systems are set up for. So that's what they've set into the Kiewit platform. And this is what the inflow actually looked like. So it went from about 375 a minute to 2,500, so 560+% increase in the span of about 2 minutes. You can probably guess what happened around 1 p.m. There was a press conference that took place announcing a new group of people could book vaccinations. So we kind of internally called this the press conference effect at Kiewit, because we saw it happen so often. And for those of you attending, you're in public sector organizations, you've probably seen something like this from an article, some that you're linked to. I think the Home Office, I'm not sure if they talk about it in this clip particularly, but that they're shown on a TV program or a news clip. It can really drive from minute to minute in a really insane spike. And so I think it ties back nicely to when this happens so quickly, it's difficult for any system to react quickly enough. And this is the type of thing that we see also for public sector registrations, right? Great. So moving on to the second point. So Jose talked about reliable services, right, tied into the reliability, one of the 5 core components. Another one was fairness. So talk about fair access to digital services, right? It's a core part of government's mission, serve all citizens. And it's especially true in these instances where we see peak demand, because there's that mismatch in demand and supply and demand that Jose mentioned earlier. So just as a concrete example of this, we work with a European government that is sort of has funding for home renovations for citizens if they're doing energy efficient home renovations, right? But there's only a fixed pool of money, and there's way more citizens who want to apply for that money than there is money available. And so how do you, if you have a situation like that, right, how are you fairly giving access to that online service? And Jose will walk through an example of that briefly, but just a couple of considerations. And again, this is high level. It really depends on what the use case is. But first, think about timing and logistics. Who can access the service? When do they need to access it? Is there any pre-work that's needed? Do you need to pre-register? Can they pre-register their info if there maybe some users are faster than others, right? If you want to support those who are less tech savvy, give them extra time to pre-register. And how do you solve that mismatch between the supply and demand, like the example I gave to you? Then on the communication side, right, again, it's not one of these kind of fluffy sounding things, but it really is foundational. Before the registration or application process, again, communicating out the timing and logistics to citizens, being very clear, transparent about that. And then during, you want to see if you have options to explain how the registration is progressing, how much availability is left for whatever it is people are booking, whether it's whether it's vaccination appointments or applications for funding. And then afterwards, is there going to be another round of registrations, or is that it? For those who missed out on the option to sign up, can they sign up for a notification of available bookings or cancellations in the future, right? In case it doesn't use the service that they had booked. And then finally, event setup. There's a lot of considerations here, but when things are done online, right, we have seen a lot of examples of bad actors, right? Bots, malicious users. What's your kind of plan for that? And then also considering, we're talking about digital services here, right? But do consider all possible user journeys from a fairness perspective, right? That also probably involves some non-digital options or some technical workarounds, right? So make sure that all citizens are being thought of front of mind as part of the registration or application.
Yeah, and Christian, then I would like to share but briefly how scheduled registration with Kiewit looks like, right? And here it's very much focused on how we use it to bring fairness to an event, right? And here we can see 3 different phases of the queue: pre-queue, queue, and post-queue. And we would take you through a very quick example on that. So here you can see a waiting room. This is that you can see the pre-queue phase, right? So here you're allowing for people to join the queue without the stress of having to kind of join at this exact moment. Otherwise, they will be very late in the queue itself, right? So here in the pre-queue phase, people are joining, and then it's only once we get to the start of the event, right? Once we transition into queue phase, that we have a randomization aspect of it, where we are, from the people that have joined during the queue, we are randomizing their place in the queue, and from then on, we are starting to letting people through the queue and into the server, right? Your server, and to provide the service. So that's a very important component of fairness, right? And once the queue is running, as we see here in this phase, it will be a first in, first out algorithm or approach, right? So the people who join later during this queue phase, they will go to the end of the queue, and they will get their place once everyone else has passed on through the queue and to the website. And here the last phase that we wanted to touch upon from a queue perspective is the post queue phase, and this is quite important also from an openness perspective that Christian will tell a little bit more in the next slides. But this is that you can share with the user what is the situation, so what happened, and why is it that they're not able to in this case register anymore.
Yep. Thanks, Jose. And you had a nice little segue into the third and final point here about this open communication, right? Openness, again, being one of those 5 core components from the OECD. And basically this boils down to 2 ideas. Do I have a say as a citizen in decisions that affect me? And can I have access to information in a clear and transparent way? So again, to have the say, right? If there's a decision, I'm able to voice my opinion about something that might affect me, and the ease of access to information is positively associated with trust, and also people who perceive government information to be open and transparent also have higher levels of trust. So how would we involve citizens with this open communication? There's a lot of answers, again, like these other points, right? We're just kind of scratching the surface on some of these. It's maybe just to get the creative juices flowing and give a couple ideas. And again, you'll hear from the Home Office as well. They go into this. One is user research, right? Both before a new process is implemented and after it's live in an ongoing way, making sure that citizens have forums for feedback when we're talking about these online or digital service delivery, a way to measure, right? So for example, a customer engagement score, so that you can see how things are trending over time. And then being open and clear about the process for registration. So we kind of hit on that a little bit in the consideration for fairness, right? But communicating clearly and effectively, how is this going to play out? What do I need to do as a citizen to ensure I have a fair shot at something that there might only be limited supply of? So just to give a concrete example of how that's translated in the waiting room, again, we're just using these as specific examples. It's obviously a much broader area, but just to give a concrete example of something a little tangible. This is from the UK Home Office as part of their passport registration. And so here I want to highlight two kind of groupings. First is these boxes that I've highlighted here, which helps provide what we call an informed wait. So it's a clear and informed explanation of where you are as a user, why you're there, what your wait time is, and the option to put in an email, for example, and get a notification when it's your turn, right? Think about this as vastly different than a 503, a server unavailable error, or just a page that says, whoops, we're busy, come back later, right? Big shift in terms of the informed and openness with which the communication is done. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is some added communication benefits, right? I mean, this is a page that people are seeing for a few minutes, right? This is maybe not so creative. It says this is a test message, right? But you get the idea. You can put in, for example, live updates in terms of, okay, all bookings for Friday are done, but Saturday is still available, things like that. Again, another level of keeping people informed. And then here, I really like as well what the Home Office did, the Passport Office did is, having some clear explanation, including a link off to their standard service, right? Only use online premium if you really need to. So adding additional clarification. And I love the while you wait on the right, again, helping people prep while waiting to make the overall experience more seamless. So we're actually now going to segue into, it's a nice transition with their waiting room into the story from the Home Office. And just to sort of recap, tie exactly what Elaine and Michael talked about back to some of the concepts we've discussed here in the webinar. So when we talk about reliable, right, they talked about ensuring that their services stayed online 24/7. They said there's no room for downtime in a world where there's social media and high visibility in the news, right? It goes back to some of the ideas of expectations we talked about earlier. For fairness, they use a first in, first out queue because it's not a scheduled registration. It's sort of an ongoing peak. So that's the fairness mechanism that they're using with the waiting room. Open communication, they talked about the user-centered design based on research, right? Having their user researchers there on the ground even as people were filling out a new process. I think they talked about their priority service. Clear communication during the registration process. We saw that, for example, on their waiting room page, and actively soliciting feedback. I think Michael mentioned both during, but also after the experience. And finally, Elaine hit on it really nicely at the end there about responsiveness. So constantly improving the service and being attuned to those shifting expectations. I really love what she said, managing the customer experience. If we get it right for customers, the business benefits follow. I think that also resonates with the message that we're trying to bring to today's webinar as well. There's a lot of pressure to deliver that, but when done well, it can really, you can really reap a lot of benefits from it. Just to know that there is a full version of the story on our website. If you want to read more, I think it's quite an inspiring one. So you can check that out. So just to wrap up today before we go into a Q&A. So again, a little reminder, if you have any questions that have come up during the presentation, please enter them in the Zoom toolbar. But Jose, can you kind of wrap things up with a bow for us today, what we talked about?
I can definitely try. On trying to summarize what we presented here, right? So I hope that we convince you that, if you're not convinced before, but that successful services and the delivery of those services is crucial, right? And it has a huge impact to both the governments and also how the and how users feel about their government. It is a massive opportunity, and it's very important to take advantage of it and get it right. Although it does have high expectations, and it's not easy. It is very challenging to meet those expectations, but we very much feel like it's worth a try, and it's highly rewarding when achieving those. And also wanted to kind of touch upon that element of correlation between satisfaction and trust, and correlation does work both ways, right? So it's very important to make sure that we're working towards making it a positive loop in that correlation. We did share then 3 IWC key strategies for delivering these successful and satisfying services. We touched on reliability, how important it is to have that service working and working consistently, about fairness and fair access to the services that are being provided, and also openness in the communication with the users, in this case, the citizens.
Great. Thanks so much, Jose. Big thanks, and again to Elaine and Michael at His Majesty's Passport Office for that interview. Again, please enter any questions you might have into the Q&A bar, but we can start off with a couple questions I can see that we've gotten in. So one is, can you share an example of how the virtual waiting room improved the business outcomes at a public sector organization? I think there's 2 things I'll highlight. And one, I think it's highlighted in this story with the Home Office. Sometimes it's about the things that you don't have to do, the savings in that regard. So it was very illuminating to me, at least, when Elaine talked about all the processes if they had a downtime before, not just fixing it, but all of the work around communicating to all the stakeholders and the citizens, and all of that communication around the issue, not even just resolving the issue, how much time and work and debriefs and postmortems and all that stuff, and all of that didn't have to happen when there is no downtime, when the services are reliable. So that's one thing. A second, and this is an example I always like to think of, is from a European tax authority that we work with. This is the second order benefits of the control. So one thing is, prevent downtime, provide reliable service, but because there's a control mechanism, right? They have a very clear idea of when we have, let's say, 1,000 people on the website reviewing their tax returns, 10 of them are going to be calling our customer support. Like, it's a pretty fixed number. They have a pretty good ratio there. So what they're able to do is resource planning. They over the years have saved millions on resource planning for their call centers, because they know, okay, I want to keep the amount of visitors, 1,000 at a time, because then I know that I can effectively meet the support staff with that range of visitors. So they actually turn the speed up during the evenings and the weekends when they don't have the support staff, because there's also not internal people using the system. So the system has higher capacity and they don't have people calling in, right? So they don't have that aspect. But I just always think that's a really interesting example. I wouldn't necessarily think of the leap from, okay, I can keep the systems online, that you could go that far in terms of the efficiencies and the planning. But that's always one I like to highlight as an example. Jose, I think we have one here that would be good for you. We're working with complex system integrations, sometimes with legacy systems. How complex is it in general to add a waiting room to existing architectures?
Yep, good question. My answer would start with, it depends, right? So, and I know that's not always a satisfying answer, but it really depends on the actual architecture, on the technical landscape of our customers. Because from an integration perspective, we do offer different what we call connectors, different ways of integrating with our platform, with Kiewit, and setting up the virtual waiting room. We do have the edge connectors that work at the edge. We have the server-side connectors where you can integrate on the server side, right? And we also have client side. So depending on what type of connector is used, also that will very much usually depend on the different technology stacks. the complexity would also be different. But a rule of thumb would say that if you are able to connect at the edge, then it actually simplifies things because you don't have to make changes to your existing architecture and setup, because you're having the all the work being done at the edge before redirecting users to the servers.
Great. Then we got a question in the chat here. I can see following pre-registration, can we triage the pre-reg info and influence the queue based on attributes? Let's see. I'm not sure I 100% understand it. I don't know, Jose, do you want to take a stab at it? Otherwise, I can try and add on something.
I think, yeah, I would need some more information. Maybe it might be good that we maybe follow up directly on this question. I think overall, we do have a kind of, I think it might be possible, but I would need to understand the question a little bit more and the use case and what is it that we're trying to achieve with it before answering some more.
Okay, so for example, if the info provided by the registrant suggests it's a high priority case versus a low priority one.
I think that will depend a lot, and thank you for providing some more data. Right, I think it will depend a lot on how that setup can be done and where that pre-registration info can be provided. Right, I think there's a lot of, and we have seen with some customers quite some complex setup with different waiting rooms depending on the traffic and depending where users are trying to get to. We also have some interesting use cases with what we call an invite-only waiting room. So there could be ways of handling kind of a high priority case and a lower priority case. Might be worth trying to reach out and directly connecting to understand it a bit better.
Yeah, maybe one, I don't know if this exactly hits it, but two things that come to mind on that tax, the European tax organization. They have separate logins for professional accountants who are doing taxes on behalf of citizens and then for citizens directly. And they kind of protect those separately. So they have different logins and different waiting rooms set up for those. So again, like Jose mentioned, it kind of depends on the setup. One other thing to highlight, again, I don't know that this would fit in this particular case, but there is something that we call invite only, which is a way that you can upload a specific set of visitors based on some unique identifier. Could be email, but it could be ID or something else, where then there's a verification step where only those invited visitors are able to get into the waiting room and, for example, get access to the application or registration. So that might be, again, depending on how much time there is before the pre-reg and the event itself. That might be also a possibility, but I think it's a good point, Jose, that it might be worth taking that specific use case. But it sounds like that there would be some options there. I know it's a little bit related, and thank you for the question. A little bit related. There was there's one right here. It says you mentioned something about suspicious traffic and bots. Can you elaborate on that and give a few examples on how to mitigate? A little bit related to the question we just answered, but one way I like to think about this, and I'll pass it over to Jose, is like Kiewit kind of acts like a security checkpoint in an airport, right? So you're able to come into the lobby of an airport. There's of course security going on, security cameras, police, etc., whatever. But if you don't have a boarding pass or a passport, that's fine. Like no one's checking that. But if you're then trying to get into the protected area of the airport where you want to complete your transaction, in this case, getting onto a flight, then you need to go through the security checkpoint, which is a kind of a forced, flow all visitors through there where there's the time. It affords the luxury of time to check everyone's boarding pass, passport or ID, scan the bags, etc., and then move you into the protected portion of the airport. I see Kiewit functioning similarly, that the waiting room protects a certain portion of the site, whether it's a login or a specific page, and kind of funnels all visitors through that. And that affords the opportunity to run some security checks, verify their ID, do some proof of work challenges, make sure that we're keeping some of the automated traffic out, and then proceed into the registration. Jose, any ideas you'd like to tack on there?
Yeah, I can try to add on to it, and I'll try to be succinct because I think we have a little bit out of time. But from a bot perspective and the work here, I think it's important to understand that there's no silver bullet in this case, right? It's something that is very important for us is to consider a multi-layered approach to protect against bots and do the best we can to fight them, right? And that relies on a lot of, or can rely on a lot of different systems, right? Kiewit can be one of them, but you also have firewall and some rules and protections there. You also have some, for example, other bot management services and offerings that you can also have there as part of that multi-layered approach that you hopefully then in the end you have good protection across that will give you good protection against bots, but it's by no means easy, and there's no one single answer.
Yeah, great, thanks, Jose. And it just reminded me too that in that home office story that we have on the website, they also talk about suspicious traffic and the insights they were able to get into that and how they're able to mitigate some of that. So definitely do check out that story. I'll kind of flip back to it here if you want the link. But thank you again so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate the questions, the engagement, and we will be sending out the recording of this in case you want to go back or send it to a colleague who might not have been able to attend today. Any last parting words, Jose?
No, just thank you for joining, and I was very happy to be here and be able to share our experience here.
Likewise. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.